It's no longer just a concept. KTM has confirmed that 2 new supermotos will be brought to the market in 2025, despite their looming financial woes. Let's talk about it. So I had recently just announced that the state of the supermoto was looking really good for 2025, and this confirms it. Previously, KTM teased us with a 390 SMCR and a 125 SMCR, although no one wants to talk about that one. But just this week, KTM has confirmed that these bikes will be available and hitting showrooms in early 2025. And it's actually been announced before the brand new 390 Adventure, so it's even more proof that supermoto is back in vogue. Take that, ADV bros. You'll have to sit with your Starbucks and wait. So this new 390 is based on the existing 390 Duke. Same engine, same trellis frame, but a little bit more ground clearance. And this thing looks pretty freaking awesome, if I do say so myself. I could be a little bit pedantic in this case and say that it's not technically a supermoto because it is based off of their naked bike rather than something like their 350 EXC, for example. It is a bit chunkier, the shrouds are kind of weird, makes it look like it's constantly shrugging, but I think it looks really cool. It's got aggression, it's got this future-y look. Just don't walk into the front of that thing by accident. And with this release comes more specs. It says that it's going to have about 44 horsepower, about 29 foot-pounds of torque, and a dry weight of 340 pounds. Now 340 is interesting because if you compare this to the existing 690 SMCR, that thing weighs about 10 pounds less and has a whopping 30 more horsepower. And I don't like how those figures are figuring. But beyond that, they're highlighting that this bike sports some electronic ride modes, ABS, and LED headlights. It sounds a little weird to be highlighting LED headlights in 2025, but this is KTM we're talking about, so that is a big deal. And real quick, we'll touch on the 125 SMCR, which predictably is not as impressive power-wise as the 390. Duh, this thing has the same weight as the 690, but only sporting about 14 horsepower. Still, it's better than the Grom. But the worst news, if you look at the press release, it redirects to the European website rather than the US website, which means this is not going to be available in North America. Why? I mean, I get it. We don't have a tiered licensing system in North America, so there's not as much of a need for a 125cc, but it doesn't have to always mean that everything is bigger in America. Am I the only one that thinks this? But this is interesting timing because if you recall, a few months ago, Suzuki announced that they redesigned their 400cc supermoto, so it seems like Suzuki is now finally going to have direct competition. I like this because now there's another manufacturer to directly compare to Suzuki's new DRZ 4SM, and maybe this will mean that Suzuki will no longer be able to skate by and make no changes whatsoever to their bikes like they did with the quarter-century run that they had with the previous 400SM. You hear that, Suzuki? No more bold new graphics. And it's also interesting to see the comparisons in specs between the 400s because while I initially scoffed at the DRZ for being a whopping 340 pounds, now we know that this is exactly the same as the KTM. In fact, what's more interesting is that the 340 pounds that Suzuki is claiming is curb weight while KTM is showing dry weight. That means Suzuki is actually the lightweight in this segment. Although the DRZ is only claiming 38 horsepower, so KTM definitely has them on that one, and with enough of a gap that I think the weight difference doesn't really matter, and the KTM is slightly more torquey too. Suzuki's probably going to have the reliability point though, because their bike is based to some degree on the old model, which was dead reliable and absolutely bulletproof. Plus KTM and reliability aren't exactly synonymous, to put it lightly. And let's be honest, reliability is going to be a hard point to improve on if you don't have the money to back it. We all know by now that KTM is going through solvency issues, and we'll see in the coming year how that pans out for them. Seems like they'll most likely be bought out by somebody. Bajaj maybe? CF Moto? We'll see. I just hope that whatever happens to KTM, this model is going to continue on and won't just be a one and done. The fact that they're actually releasing this bike tells me that they've put enough time and resource into it that it is important enough, which is a good sign. No price listed in the US yet for the KTM or the Suzuki. However, I found a UK article that actually had a stated price, which is the US equivalent of $7,000. And I hope to God that's true because $7K would be an amazing price because the only equivalent that we have currently is the outgoing DRZ 400SM, which was going for $7,900. And since Suzuki hasn't stated a price, I was curious to see what they were going to do and most likely assumed that they were going to stick around that 7.9 mark, so that KTM is looking a whole lot sweeter. So I know I said previously that I was seriously interested in getting the Suzuki, but now with all this information, I'm thinking this might be what finally pushes me over the edge and getting into that orange side. So anyone else interested in this bike, or is the 400cc segment looking a little too slow and bulky to care? So I obviously have a soft spot for the small bore, which is why I'm so annoyed that we are not getting the 125cc option. But regardless, I'm still excited that we are getting several offerings that are under 450cc, and I'll be really excited to get my hands on these things in the wild. But let me know your thoughts down below. Never thought I'd be excited for a KTM, especially in 2025, but here we are.
KTM doesn't go under, at least until I can get on this bike, and they can do whatever they like. So KTM, don't die just yet. I need you for a few months, don't buy